Tamara, I know your piano trio spent is dedicated to the climate crisis, which is of course a heavily researched and important topic, and I'm wondering what made you decide to dedicate this commission to it.
Right, of course. I think that I feel as though it's really important to have our creative process involve the things that are most dear to us, and as is evident, you know, with recent weather, going further back, I mean, there are so many examples of the current ecological crisis that, yeah, I feel that it's really important to speak out about that. So the inspiration in itself is the crisis itself and how it affects all of us, honestly, and will continue to affect us a lot more. So it's important just to be aware about it and think and see how your actions can influence that.
Absolutely, we appreciate your advocacy. And are there any moments in the piece in which you're trying to convey a message that you'd like the audience to listen to?
Yeah, so the piece consists of 3 movements, and throughout the 3 movements, there will be brief pauses between them, very brief, but I think it's pretty easy to follow the 3-movement structure. And as they progress, they get more sparse and more barren. So I think that's a symbolic approach.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So the whole there's not a specific section, it's the whole thing, really.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Fantastic, thank you. Jessica, moving on to your piece, Florence, I viewed one of your performances of the piece and listened to your program note, and I noticed that you define the word as the brilliance and unpredictability of lightning.
Mm-hmm.
Could you tell us a bit about in which moments you convey that in music?
Yeah, sure. So throughout the piece, you can hear that it's very flashy at points, and other times it really dies down. So it's kind of like in a storm. You have moments of lightning, right? But you can never tell when the lightning hits. So in the piece, I tried to reflect this by having moments where it's like suddenly big and loud, and then it dies down, and then another moment where it just kind of like throws you off, kind of. So my goal was to make you nervous.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Awesome. I'd like to talk a bit about the two of you personally. Tamara, I read your bio, and you write in it that your music conveys conveys the human experience. Could you tell us a bit about that?
Definitely. I feel as though everyone universally experiences similar emotions, and there's like a very vast spectrum of those emotions, and I don't know, I wouldn't necessarily describe my music as theatrical, but I do tend to really lay in heavily with my feelings, and that, I think it's pathos? I might be wrong on that, but really lay heavy into that, and I think that's, art has an ability to represent such feelings that we all share, and I think it's kind of like a unifying activity. Yeah.
You also mentioned in your bio how important your Ukrainian American heritage is to you, and how do you convey that in your music?
Well, I think my Ukrainian American heritage has honestly affected every facet of my life, especially my music though, you know. I've written 2 pieces so far that are like super heavily related to Ukraine. The first piece was quite a while ago, I think it was like 2021 or 2020, and it was a string quartet having to do with the brutalist architecture that a lot of post-Soviet buildings have, and various, you know, parts of the broken Soviet Union, Ukraine included in that. So I kind of grew up seeing these structures, and I wrote a piece about that, and then I had another piece that was a clarinet trio, and that was written maybe within the last 2 years, and it was titled Bucha, which is kind of self-explanatory. But like a lot of my music has had to do with that, and in general, my influence kind of draw from that Postsoviet style. Like my first favorite composers were Shostakovich and Prokofiev.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know. I think it's been a fun experience being on either side. You know, American, Ukrainian. It's kind of tough when you're a part of two groups and you feel like you're not quite a part of both the groups. And I find that a really fertile ground for creativity and expressing myself and trying to create, like, that's why I'm so tied into emotions. It's the same idea. Like, I like to draw from inspirations having to do with my own life that are at the same time connected to everyone's. We all experience those feelings of being a part of a group but not quite.
Yeah. I'd like to talk a bit about your ensemble choices now. I was really intrigued when I saw that this commission of yours was a piano trio, because my composition teacher, David Conti, says that the piano trio is probably one of, if not the hardest ensemble to write for, because you have three instruments, the violin, cello, and piano, that all have enormous ranges. They can have various roles in an ensemble, and I'm wondering what drew you to this ensemble, and why you decided to rise to the challenge, or if you didn't feel like it was a challenge, then what attracted you to it?
Right, like, I've written for piano trio maybe twice before. I think it's challenging, definitely. But I actually saw it as something that I knew a bit about. There weren't many forces to choose from. I think it was like 4 or 5, and I love writing for the voice, but I wanted to write an instrumental work, and piano trio really called for me. I like the fact that it has so many potentials. That's what drew me to it, is that there's so much to explore, and whether or not I sort of tick every box, it doesn't quite matter, because I mean there's so much to explore. It's really inspiring to me. Yeah.
And while you were writing Spent, did you have to diverge from your normal compositional process, and if so, what is that process?
I think every piece has a slightly unique process for me, but for the most part, my pre-compositional process, like all the things I do before I start putting notes to a page or recording, you know, my musical thoughts, I have like a huge pre-compositional process, and I think for this piece it was especially huge, and it was kind of like looming in the back of my mind for a while until it actually came out. And so I had spent less time composing this piece than I have previously, but that is because my pre-compositional process was a lot larger. So I guess the ratio of those two things changed for this piece.
That's okay. And Jessica, similar. You had a similar instrumentation for your piece Florence, albeit a duet, not a trio. Like I said, the violin and cello have enormous ranges. They can take on different roles. And I noticed after studying the score and listening to a performance that you seem to really utilize the instruments and their full capabilities. Was it a challenge illuminating those strengths while also shaping the piece to convey the theme and ideas you wanted to?
Yeah, it definitely was challenging, because prior to that, I had written a couple of pieces for strings, but in larger settings. So the piece I had written before that was for strings was a string quartet. So I felt things would be able to mesh with each other a little bit better. When it came to this duet, I found that it was really easy. Like it became a lot easier to hear places where it's like, you know, it feels a little weaker, I suppose, or like when I was writing it, it was more obvious where certain places were kind of falling apart because you only have 2 instruments to work with. And so, since you only have these 2 instruments, you have to, I feel like I was really pushed to like really push them to, I guess like, how do I say, just like push them to the furthest of their capabilities, I suppose you could say. So with this one I just went super adventurous, had them go crazy really. So, yeah, but it was a really interesting process because I hadn't written for 2 strings before, and yeah, like you said, I did feel the difficulty with writing for them too. But I feel I really learned a lot about each instrument and how they can work with each other after that, so it was a really fun process.
Now that we've talked about your ensemble choices, we've talked a bit about you. I want to touch on your educational experiences as well. Tamara, I know that you recently moved from SF to New York City, and I'm from New York. My sister graduated from NYU, and I know from talking to her that the city can be pretty overwhelming, and it's a little faster paced than out west, out here. San Francisco is definitely a little more compact. And do you find that that environment is very different? Have you had to adapt to New York City in any way? Do you feel like your colleagues and your peers are pushing you in a different way than they did in San Francisco? And do you feel like your music is evolving the way you want it to?
Wow, that's a lot of questions.
Yeah,
truly,
sorry.
but I love it.
Yeah.
So, just to clarify, I was in Manhattan for 2 years for my master's, but I completed my degree back this summer in May, so I have moved back to Denver, Colorado, temporarily so, but I did have a really nice 2-year experience that I can talk about in full length and detail. So, yeah, first I'll talk about the educational sort of composition aspect that within the academia, within the school, I did feel like I was pushed in different directions, and it was very useful for me. I really widened my scope and perspective on music, on art in general. And it was really useful for me. The cities, how they differ, being San Francisco, more compact, New York. The thing is, in San Francisco, I think there's a very rich music scene. So there's a lot going on, surely, in the entire Bay Area. But when I was going to school here, I guess I was in my undergrad, and I did see a good deal of it. I surely did, but I didn't feel like I was in the position to explore it fully, so I don't even feel like I have the ability to, really talk about that to its full extent, although I know there's a lot going on. With New York, I really enjoyed my experience in New York as an artist, as a composer, as a musician. There were simply multiple concerts to go to at any point of any day throughout the year. Like, there was no shortage. There was actually a sense of exhaustion, really, from going to concerts most days of the week, and it's so inspiring. There's so much going on, and surely it's overwhelming. But I do find it, I found it to be a great experience and something that was worthwhile. And going forward, what were you saying about how it affected me, or?
I was just wondering how the environment at MSM was different from SFCM. How you feel like your peers and colleagues challenge you differently, and how your music evolved. If you have any thoughts on that.
Okay, yeah, and I could definitely be more specific about that. At MSM, there was such a wide breadth of different composers, having their own influences from different schools of music, and I did feel challenged by some of the works produced and listening. Early on, I felt challenged because I was simply not exposed to stuff like that previously. So how did it affect me is, honestly, I had a bit of a crisis, so to speak. Musically, it really widened. I'm just going to repeat myself from earlier, but it really widened my perspective.
Absolutely.
And I think that shows in my music too, and there's always a moment to reel it in as well. But yeah.
Jessica, you earned your bachelor's in technology and applied composition, and your master's in concert composition, both at SSCM. What drove you to pursue a master's in concert composition?
Well, I really liked the community at SFCM. I really like that it being a smaller school, you feel that everyone is pretty close with each other, like not just your fellow students, but also with the professors and the staff. And I really appreciated that because I felt really comfortable just being able to go to someone and being like, hey, let's do this, or hey, I have this piece, do you want to take a look and give me some critique? So I really enjoyed my time in both departments. With the technology program, the TAC program, It was cool because I went in not really knowing what I was doing because I didn't really know anything about the technology side of composing. I remember there was a class I took where they were talking about using what's called a visual audio workstation, or DAW.
Going into your freshman year?
Yeah, my freshman year.
Yeah.
So the first day we had this class, they were talking about using a DAW to compose, and I remember writing in my notes like, what is a DAW? And I found out what it was later, and then it was like, what did I get myself into? But it was really cool learning those tools because I feel that when I went into my composition masters, I could then use what I had learned from the tech side of things in undergrad and apply it to my concert music. You know, whether it's like the composition process or implementing like maybe electronic elements into a concert work, stuff like that. Like I hadn't really considered that before until I, got to learn about the more like technology, like kind of side of stuff, and then learning how they can like really blend well with each other. Because I really like doing that. Like that's something I found after studying in both these programs is that I really like combining those two worlds with each other. Like you can look at them and they look really different from each other. On the one side you have like your acoustic instruments. On the other side you have synthesizers that make really strange sounds. But if you know what you're doing, it might work out. And I love it when it works out because the sounds, they can complement each other and they can also like, they can emphasize each other, you know? So it's like individually they work in a certain way, but then you combine them and it's like, I made something cool. So I love it when that happens.
Yeah, I think it's great that we have two composition programs with some crossover in it. For that reason, I think there are a lot of people who have taken classes in both those programs or have that dual degree, just to get the broadest skill set within composition. Those are all the questions I have. Brendan, how are we doing on time? All good? Are there any questions from the audience? No? Okay, well, thank you, Tamara. Thank you, Jessica. I had a lot of fun getting to know you.